All right. So today we're going to continue on with our say controller here and play around with this a little bit. Yesterday we left off where we could save data into an instance variable. And that instance variable then was made available to our view portion of this model view controller. So inside the view, I could make use of that instance variable yo and print it out to the screen, print it to the HTML stream that's going out to the browser. We can do other things like, let's look at the time. So let's say now equals time.now. All right, so now is what type of variable? Instance variable that holds what? A date. All right, so we should be able to print that out in our view, and we'll put a p tag around it, and we'll put, using the ERB symbols, equal sign is similar to puts, right? We're going to put out the value of the instance variable now. And let's run our project again, get that going. Open up our browser. Go to localhost 3000. And it's going to fail on me again, I bet you, huh? Painful. All right, so we added the time, and it printed out the time right here. So that's the time stored in this @now, this instance variable called now. So we can do calculations, we can do anything we want in the ERB, in the view, or we can do it in the controller. Now, ideally, we want to keep the major calculations and things like that out of the view. Although it's possible, Rails allows you to go out and query the database and everything from the view. It doesn't follow the nice paradigm of model view controller. The view should just be dealing with displaying data, not retrieving data or calculating data or anything like that. It should just be displaying information. All the information should be either calculated in the controller or retrieved from the model. Okay, so as you see, we'll be putting things in different places based on that structure, model view controller structure. All right? Any questions on how that flow goes now? All right, we're going to add one more thing today called the routing. Before the browser gets to the actual controller, it goes through this system called the routing system. The router takes the incoming web request and determines, based on that URL, what it looks like, where to go. Where do I send this request? Do I send it to the say controller, or do I send it to the products controller, or what? Okay, so that's all stored in the config folder under routes.rb. So I want you to open that file, routes.rb, under config. And this, again, is just Ruby code, and most of it is commented out. And it's, what does this, these two dot symbols mean? Do you remember this from Ruby 2? We covered it barely. That's a module, right? So this is a module which is similar to a class, but a module can contain multiple classes. And so this is the lecture module, which is my application. That's what I called my application. And this is calling a method in there, a class application, and it's going to call this routes method. And inside of this do loop here, we're going to define all of the URLs that we want people to have access to our site. Now, this one was generated for us automatically, this get say/hello. That was generated when we generated our controller yesterday. We ran the generate command. It added code to this file automatically for us. So what this is saying is, this is saying use the get verb. Remember the verbs, the HTTP verbs that I had? Use the get verb, and this is what the URL looks like to the user. Get say/hello. Okay? So when we load our browser, that's what we're looking at, right? We're seeing, well, you can't really see it, say/hello. That's the URL that's happening. So the router says, okay, there's some shorthand going on here. What's really happening is that is being redirected, or sent to, that message is sent to the say controller and the hello method. All right? And that's a shorthand way, since we're not changing anything, say goes to say, hello goes to hello, we don't have to use this extra information. And we'll talk more about the routing as we get through it. But there are different ways. I can change this completely. I can have this say Dave, and have this, the URL look different to the outside world than what is actually going on inside the Rails project. So let's see if I can get that to work. If I say Dave, it runs the same page, right? But to the outside world, this is the URL they're going to bookmark and copy and keep for themselves. Internally, it's still going to the say controller and the hello action. So I can redirect things however I want internally. But by default, if I'm going to use the names that I created, my say controller and my action names, I don't need any of this extra information here. So that's what that created for me. All right? So let's create a new action and a new view to display that action's information. So to do that, I'm going to do it manually rather than running the generator, so you can see all the pieces we have to create. So the first thing we have to do is we want to define what the URL is going to look like. So I'm going to make it a get. I'm going to use the get verb. And I want to use the say controller, but I want to go to a new method that I'm going to call goodbye, right? Obviously. So goodbye is a method in the say controller, right? So let's just try to go to that URL and see what it says. All right, it says the action goodbye could not be found for the say controller. So I'm getting this Ruby error, this Rails error in my browser, and it tells me exactly what the problem is. I don't have a goodbye action in my say controller. So I go to my say controller, and I need to define a goodbye action. How do I do that? A new method, right? Just a simple method called goodbye, and it doesn't even have to do anything, but it has to be available, all right? So I define my goodbye method. Let's go reload our page. Whoa, you gotta be kidding me. Chrome crashed. Nice. So now when I load the say goodbye, I no longer get the say controller error. I get this error saying template is missing. I don't know how to display the results of calling that goodbye action. So it tells you right away, I don't know the view, so I need a say goodbye view template, and that tells you right away it's got to be in my views folder. All right, so I go to my views folder, and I look at my say folder, and inside of that I have a named file, an HTML.erb file, that describes how this action will be displayed back to the page, right? So I need to create a new one of these files to match that goodbye. Now, RubyMine has this nice feature that lets you switch back and forth that I showed you yesterday, right? I can switch to the view. But it knows, hey, I don't have a view there yet, so let me create one for you. And by default, it should be called goodbye.html.erb. Don't change it. It should be the same name. So it creates it for me. There's my goodbye. I can start putting in my HTML. Goodbye, Dave. Now when I reload my page, I've gone all the way through my routing file, through my controller, to my goodbye action, which sends it back to the goodbye.html view and sends it back to the browser. All right, so I've made a complete loop there. So I can put anything I want on these pages. I can put tables and CSS and anything I want there. How did I make the file? So I did it. Yeah, you did. It was really fast. The inside of here, we manually created this goodbye method here. And I clicked on this little link here. And the first time you do it, it says, I don't know what that is, so create it for me. And then it gives you a blank HTML page. Okay, any questions on that?
We go back to the routes.
Okay.
Say hello. That was generated by the
When we generated the controller, correct.
So, and that's not a Ruby line thing. If you're doing it from the command line, that
Generate is a Rails program.
So it would update this file.
Yes. Doesn't matter where you do it from. Right. Yes, correct.
Can I click over to your say hello real quick?
All right, isn't that great? How easy that is? So I want you guys to add a new action, and we'll call it something. Okay? SOMETHING, something, as your action in the say controller. All the way through, you're going to have to touch 3 files. I want you to do it manually for now so you understand the routing that goes through. All right, so there are 3 files that you need to touch to add a new action in this case. So let's start from the outside in. I always like to think of from the browser in. The browser makes a request, and I want the request to be something like say something, right? So the first thing that the request comes into is called what? It's not called what? The first request comes into what? No, because we added a new thing today. The routing. Okay, so it goes to the routing. So we need to make this work in the routes file.
So we have an MVCR now?
Well, it's such a small part that it's not part of the paradigm.
What part is the route part of?
The controller.
Okay, so then we're going to the controller.
But we're not. But we're not. All right, so I need to go say something. I need a new get verb. This is a new URL coming in, and by default it's going to go to the say controller and the something action. So then the next step is in the controller, routes to the controller. I need a new method called something. And then the third file is the view, right? So from the controller, it's going to go to the view. And as a shortcut, I can click this little view. It says you don't have one, create one for me. And this is say something. So now let's go test it. Bada boom, bada bing, look at that. Is that great? So I can add additional methods and things like that, and you'll see that these are important as we start adding our blogs and our products and all that kind of stuff. You'll see that come through. But this is just to get you used to the browser sending a request, goes through the router to the controller, and from the controller goes to the view, and the view goes back to the browser. So you need to keep that loop in your mind. Okay? And sometimes there might be an offshoot of that loop to go out to the model to get something, but the loop is still in play, all right? All right, cool. So let's use the generator to generate one. It will do all three for us. But let's generate a whole brand new controller just for fun. So let's use I can right click on app and say run the Rails generator. And we want a controller. We'll give it some name. I'm going to call it Dave. The Dave controller. And notice it gives you an example up here. How do we name classes in Ruby? Capitalized, right? And we use camel case for the words. So if I had Dave's products, I would capitalize the P as well. It's camel cased for the class names. And that's required for a class. It has to be capitalized. Remember that? So it's a good idea to just put this. Rails actually fixes it up for you, but it's better to put that in ahead of time. So I'm just going to do Dave. Now, let's add a couple of actions at the same time. So, teach, all right, so we can teach Dave something. And we can separate that with spaces. Speak and, I don't know, dig. Dig, okay. All right, so I've created 3 actions in my one controller. And now I can just say, okay. And it's going to go through and generate code for me. It's going to touch all 3 of those files for me automatically and create the files that it doesn't have. So now I have a Dave controller that has 3 actions, teach, speak, and dig. And it creates a new folder inside of the views called Dave. So Dave is the same name as my controller. The folder name is the same. They have to be the same. And yes, they're all lowercase. And then inside of that, I have a dig.html, a speak.html, and a teach.html. All right, what is the third file that this would have touched? The routing. Okay, so let's go look at our routing file. And you'll see that it automatically added to the top these three lines for me automatically. It created a Dave teach and a Dave speak and a Dave dig. Isn't that great? Automatically created for you. So it would be nice now, we have all of our pages. Let's test it, make sure that it actually works. I can say Dave teach. And I can say Dave dig. Dig, Dave dig. See Dave dig. See Dave dig with Spot. Dave and what was the other one? Speak. So this tells you, this is shorthand for, this is the Dave controller, this is the speak action, and this particular file, notice how it puts some HTML in there so you know where to go to find it, to edit that. Okay, I wouldn't leave that in my production, right? I would go edit that and put in the HTML that I want to have. All right, so it would be nice to be able to have links on my page that go back and forth, right? Wouldn't that be cool to have? So Rails has some really nice ways of doing that based on this whole routing system. So to see that, I want you to go up under Tools, go down to Run Rake Task, Tools, Run Rake Task, and that comes up with all kinds of these rake tasks. And we'll get more familiar with rake as we go along, but rake is just a program that executes some more Ruby code in the environment, rather in your Windows environment, rather than inside of Rails specifically. It does it outside of the environment. So I want to run the rake task called routes. And what that does is, it's got a little description, print out all defined routes in match order with names. So We're going to run that, no arguments, say OK, and that's going to execute. Takes a minute to run, and it will create some good information for us. Okay, so they've they've even put titles in it in Rails 4. Look at that, beautiful. So this is the verb. The column here is verb, and as we get more and more into Rails, we'll have different things like get and put and delete and post. Okay, so our get verb says this is the URI, which is Uniform Resource. I think it's indicator. It's the part of the URL that doesn't include the domain name is what that is. So the domain name is to the left of this. So /Dave/teach goes to the controller action of Dave controller, the teach action. Our say hello down here goes to the say controller and the hello action. Okay? This parentheses dot colon format we'll look at later, but it allows us to have different ways of looking at that data. By default, it's going to be HTML, but I could add some things like give it to me as a PDF or give it to me as a XML document, things like that. All right, so this is useful. So that we know about, right? All useful stuff. This is stuff we know about, right? What Rails does, in addition to creating that, internally it creates a nice variable method name that I can use in my program. So if I want to go to Dave/teach, I go to Dave_teach_path. They leave out the path here because it's on everything. So they're trying to shorten the columns down. So, yeah, I'm recording. So, all right. So that gives us these method names. It automatically creates methods. And Ruby is writing Ruby code for you. It's becoming self-aware, right? So it's pretty cool. I can use that as a method in my ERB files. So let's go to my hello file here. And I want to add a link to this. Now, Ruby has this built-in method called link to. All right? I want to link to something, and I want to link to my Dave teach method. This is a method in Ruby that will, I need _path as well. So I'm going to link to that path, and this will print out the result of calling this link to method with this value sent to it. And let's see what it looks like. So I need to go to say hello, Dave, say hello, right? Look at that. It automatically created an HTML A tag. Let's look at the source. This is what it created. Oops. Wow. Come on. Come on. Sorry, guys. I get nice and big for you. This is what it created, this A tag with an href of the path name to say hello. And since I didn't add anything else to it, it added this as the click text as well. So that's not a very good click text, right? That should be something else. So let's go and let's start looking at the Rails API a little bit. I know we're running late here, but api.rubyonrails.org is where we want to go to. api.rubyonrails.org. These are all of the Rails methods and things. It covers everything you'd ever want to know. So I'm going to type in link to, and I want this action view because we're dealing with the view itself. So I'm going to click on that, and that tells me all kinds of information on how I can create this link to. And remember, it's just a method, and I want to link to something. So It creates a tag with the name. So we want to have the name as the first parameter. So let's go and change that to teach Dave. All right, so I want this part to be the click text. And this is going to be the actual URL now. All right, so let's reload that. Boy, that's awfully big. So now it says teach Dave, and when I click on it, it goes to my Dave teach method, my Dave controller, and my teach action. All right, I can't go back because I don't have a link on that page, but teach Dave works. Isn't that great? Isn't that simple? Easy to add a link. So the first argument of a link to is what you want to have in the click text. The second argument is where you want that click text to go. And this is generated for us automatically through the routes that we just talked about. And it does it that way so that I can go back later on. The president says, oh, I want this to change. I can change just the routing file, and the rest of my code will not have to change. I can change this instead. They don't want it to go to Dave Teach. They want it to go to something else. I could change one line of code here, and the rest of my code would still go to the same place. It wouldn't matter. It would just be that the visible URL to people would look different. All right, that's about all today. Any questions?